Well, developers, can you hear us? Can you see us? Notice I said us because today I have a very special guest. His name is Eddie. He has been in the business for 15 plus years. And today we're going to be talking about open source software, how it can help you, how you can get started. What is it? All those good things. So I'm going to stop babbling for a moment and introduce our guest. Eddie, tell us about yourself, some basic stats. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? All that stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction and for having me on your channel. I'm so passionate about open source and even more passionate about getting everyone into open source. And we're going to go into that in a minute. So a bit about myself. Like you said, I've been in the industry as a full stack developer for 15 years, started off with Java, PHP, and then in the last, I think like 6, 7 years, gone into full stack JavaScript, okay, TypeScript, but basically the same thing. And yeah, I love what I do. And yeah, I really love sharing it on YouTube, doing live streams like yourself. So it definitely keeps me busy. And I'm a freelancer stroke contractor, and I do client work as well as the community work. And
Excellent.
I've recently become a GitHub star, which has been awesome because GitHub selected 14 people out of the 44 plus million people on GitHub. I got selected as one of those. So that was great. So thank you very much, GitHub. I got lots of swag from them. I got like things like kind of
Oh,
Octocat plushies
nice.
to loads of t-shirts, like seriously, like loads of stuff. My kind of I don't know, look, here's actually, wait, a surprise for you. I got this
What's
as
he
well.
got? What's he got?
Look, I got like boxes to
What the
open of
heck?
swag that's arrived from like GitHub and so
That is amazing. So how does one become a GitHub star?
you have to get nominated and then you go through this process of they try and see what you do in the community. It doesn't just have to be code. Again, we're going to dig into that because I'm really excited because I really believe open source is for everybody and people can really benefit from it. And we're going to talk about, I suppose, the money side and so on. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you need to invest time and effort over a longer period. And yeah, I was just so honored to get that message that I've been nominated and to get the message that I'd been selected. And there were only 14 of us. I think there might be 16 of us now, but still, like the numbers are really, really small. So yeah, it's opened so many doors for me. So I really recommend, yeah, open source and getting into that space.
Well, congrats. That's
So,
really amazing to be in that
yeah.
that special group of people. Yes, and the swag. I mean, you got to show it off. Awesome. So, you always been a fan of you? Well, you said a few years ago you really got into open source. Can you kind of describe your coding
Sure.
journey in a nutshell, starting 15 years ago? What was the scene like back then, and then how did it transform to what it is today?
It was so different back then. I think, you know, everyone doesn't appreciate how lucky they are nowadays. You've got things like GitHub. So we'll get to that. So, okay,
Nice.
let's go back like 15, 16 years. I was doing a bit of HTML, CSS, and I really, I was an electronic engineer from university, and I didn't enjoy electronics. I enjoyed the software side. So did HTML and CSS, built some websites on the side for fun, for friends, family, and then slowly for small projects and clients, then got into PHP so I could do a bit more dynamic websites. And there wasn't a lot of resources back then. People used Dreamweaver a lot, and I'd get some clients, again, small clients, but they'd say, oh, someone's built this site. It looks great, but doesn't really work very well. And you'd look at it and be Dreamweaver kind of has injected like loads of horrendous code into that page. And then finally got a job in doing PHP, and it was really low pay at the time. My friends were earning more than me because they continued into electronic engineering, and I kind of almost took a step back. But then within a few years, I felt I'd taken like 5 steps forward. So sometimes it is really good to take that step back and then you can leap forward. And I did PHP and then got into Java as I got bigger projects. I was full time back then. So I did freelancing to begin with for like 2 years, and I realized to learn more and to excel, I wanted to really go into a company. Started off with small companies and got bigger, and then I was doing PHP and Java. And then after doing that for about 5 years, so about 10 years ago, I thought, you know what, I actually want to go freelance because I feel that I could manage my time better, so I could do some more open source, and I could pick the projects that I work on. So I did that. And that was the best decision I ever made. It
Hmm.
really, really was, because I could pick the projects that I wanted to do. And sometimes I could pick, say, 2 clients and work twice as hard if I'm saving for a deposit on a house or a car or whatever. And then other times I could say, you know what, a family time, let's kind of work part-time for like a couple of months or take a month off. So it allowed me to really flex when I wanted to, up and down. And so that was great. And then about 10 years ago, when I went into contracting and freelancing, I started going to more conferences, getting more into open source, only a little bit. So when I got into open source, we didn't have GitHub. We didn't even have Git like
Right.
back then. It was all like CSV and SVN. I mean, we were excited to use SVN because CSV was so bad. So imagine like how bad was what we had. And when GitHub came along, that was a real game changer, because before you have to log into people's own self-hosted platforms for SVN. You'd have to sign all these forms to say that your work, you're not going to charge for it, and they own it. And it's just really complicated stuff. And everyone had their own different types of licensing, and no one really understood MIT or GNU, et cetera, and so on. So when GitHub came along, that was when I really kind of stepped up my game. I think about five years ago, I was in the top 500 open source contributors in the world on GitHub. And that really put me on the map in terms of getting noticed. I had people like Facebook saying, love your community collaboration. And remember, it's not just about code. So do interrupt me at any point, by the way, because I'll talk forever on this.
Go for it. No, I love it. I love it.
GitHub really isn't about code, and even more recently, so fast forwarding to the last 3 years, say, for example, I really believe not only is GitHub an open source for everybody, and we can talk about what open source is as well, because I think I've kind of rushed ahead, but it's not just about code. In fact, I'm starting to believe that code is actually secondary. It's like a positive side effect. It's more about communication and collaboration. So when I interview people for my clients or hire people for my team, I'm actually I look at their GitHub 100%, but I'm not looking about kind of how good their code is necessarily today. That's more like second or third priority. First priority is I want to see what's their communication like. How do they reply to people's comments? When people reply to them, how do they reply back? Because attitude and communication is the most important. And then skills can be taught, but attitude is more difficult to teach. So if someone has the right attitude, that you don't always have the right answers. And it's really true. I mentor at some teenage hackathons, and I learn so much because they just look at it from a different point of view, and that really helps. So when people say, how can I get a mentor? I want to do X, Y, and Z. I said, don't get one mentor. Everyone can be your mentor. I mean, everyone watching here can be my mentor, because I can learn something from everyone, because they've all had different experiences, taken different routes to where they are, and so forth. And one last thing.
Go for it.
Open source really doesn't care about where you're from, what you're wearing, how much you earn. It really just cares that you visit once in a while. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So when I see people, if they're, I've done a weekend of code, here's like 100 commits. It's like, great. The rest of the year did nothing. And so it's really important that you try and do something little and often, and you just visit open source once in a while. And it doesn't have to be code. You can put a comment in someone's pull request, review it, comment on someone's issue, and involved in the conversation. That's actually really, really important. And actually, the second priority I do on GitHub is one last thing, I promise, is I look at their code today. I don't mind too much the quality of it. And then I look at their code a month ago, 2 months ago, and all I want to see that their code today is better. So when people say, I'm not going to push my code until it's ready, don't, because you lose that history. People will, for one, want to join you on your journey and see what you're doing. You don't go to the movies just to watch the trailer. You actually kind of, want to watch the whole movie, the whole story. And I want to see how someone's code was before and compare it to today. Make sure they're still learning.
So
I'll take a breath now.
Okay. So there's a lot to talk about with all that. There's so much to talk about. So GitHub in this ecosystem is a core component of open source. But can we take a step back? What the heck is open source?
Good question. So people know what Instagram is, kind of Facebook and Twitter. So open source is social coding. That's what GitHub says. And I believe it to be the case. So just like on Instagram, you can comment on someone's picture, you can comment on someone's code. You can also like someone's code, you can star it and so on. But you can go a step further. So think of it as social coding kind of like on steroids. Because not only can you like someone's project, comment on someone's project, you can actually contribute back to it. And remember, contribution is not just about code. So you can contribute, people can contribute by raising an issue because they've got an idea. or because they've found a bug. And that's still contribution. You still get a green square for raising an issue, and it doesn't count towards Hacktoberfest, and we'll come to that shortly. But it does count towards a contribution. And if you comment on someone's issue, you don't get a green square. But I still really believe it is part. It will still show up on your profile, and it's really part of the whole ecosystem of building up your profile. So you can take it a step further. You can contribute to someone's code and make an improvement. And improvements don't have to be big. I think people think, oh, I've got to write like 2 pages of code to make it worthwhile. Actually, the smaller pull requests, and a pull request is where you make a change to someone's code, and then you submit it to them to get them to review it. And if they accept it, it goes into their project. So sorry, go on.
I gotta interject here. So this
Yeah,
open source
please.
is in contrast to what though? Is it like closed source or not so open source, or what are the alternatives to open source? If something's open, is there a closed source?
That's a good question. I'm glad you raised it. Yes, most companies, especially the old-fashioned ones, do have closed source where only the people on the team can see the code, can contribute to it. And there's huge disadvantages to that, in that people don't do their best work because they know only 3 or 4 people can see it.
Mhm.
I'm not saying it's bad work, but it's not the best. When you know, like imagine you're taking a picture to share with your family, it's going to be a okay picture, but it's not going to be the best picture you could do. But if you're going to post it on socials, it is going to be a much better picture. You're really going to think about it. And so that's why I love open source projects. I feel people make a little bit more of an effort, even if it is just putting that one line of documentation in, or whatever it is. I just feel it's just that little bit better. Subconsciously, they're thinking a future employer might see it, a future colleague might see it. So I will do that one little bit more. It doesn't have to be perfect. I know people get scared and say when it's perfect and ready, but just to be good enough for what you know that day. I guarantee you that people, if they commit their code today, even their best code that they've ever written today, you'll look back in a month and you'll think, it's not that good. I know. I look back like a day and I think, what idiot wrote this? And it's got my name against
I
it.
know, I
So
know, I do same, guilty. I know, it's crazy, exactly, like 24 hours later, you look back and you're like, "Oh my, did I really do this?" It's like,
that's a
"What?"
really good thing, though. I think that's a positive. I think that shows that we're learning all the time. That's part of the fun of being in tech.
Absolutely, yeah, and so, it's funny you mentioned that, that is such a good illustration of, like, th if you're there's almost a mild social pressure when it is open source because you do know someone else is gonna look at it, and like you say, it's important to not be perfect about it because if you're looking for perfection, it's never gonna happen, but to just put that extra little bit of effort knowing that someone else is watching or an employer or, your peers or someone, um, anybody out there who might see it, and so you are pressured to put a little more, or inspired maybe is the better word, to put a little more effort
Yes.
into it. So GitHub then is a core component of this whole open source, ecosystem. What roles does GitHub play?
There are alternatives. I don't want to upset people who love, say, GitLab and so forth. There are alternatives, but GitHub is the main open source platform. And I think a lot of companies are also using it for their closed source, because then they can, have it all in one ecosystem, especially with GitHub Actions coming out now. You don't need to use third-party CIs. So it's really becoming a game changer. And also now with GitHub discussions, I do have a video on the new features coming out on GitHub. And GitHub
By the way,
discussions.
people, not to interrupt you, check out Eddie's channel. One of our mods, Paradoodly, can you please plug Eddie's channel? He makes amazing
Thank you.
videos. He is very active, and his GitHub. This guy eats open source for breakfast. There's no doubt about it. But go on.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so there's amazing features coming out and discussions, a bit like issues, but they're threaded. So it's like issues on steroids. And so I highly recommend people to get involved. And if people are nervous about getting involved in open source, don't be, because the one beautiful thing about GitHub is you can't really do anything wrong. Like, you just click something, do something, whatever the command is you're trying locally, commit, push, clicking on buttons like fork, and just click them. You really can't do anything wrong. And I do have actually a practice repo in our community organization, which is called Hacktoberfest Practice. And again, I'll explain what Hacktoberfest is shortly. But just go and create issues. Just go make changes. Just have fun. Go crazy. Go wild. The worst thing that will happen is you raise an issue, you raise a pull request, and we close it. Say, for example, you deleted everyone else's work in that project. That's fine. You've practiced that workflow of forking and making changes and pushing it up and making a pull request. So you gain something from that, but we wouldn't accept deleting everyone else's work. We can just close it. And so no harm is done, but there's lots of benefit there. So I just highly recommend people just doing it.
Get
And
started.
I've,
Just start
yeah,
experimenting,
just
start doing it.
yes, absolutely. Just get started because it will help people's careers so much. It will help you learn how the whole flow works. Because even for private closed source projects that you do with your company or clients, then you're going to need to know that same workflow. And so it's really important to do that. And so definitely get started and definitely do it. And it will help you network. It'll help you with your communication skills. It'll help you write better issues and comments because you need to give people feedback. You'll get feedback, but by practicing that, I think people get a lot better. So things don't get lost in translation, especially with people from all around the world contributing. Sometimes things can get lost in translation and people can get upset. But by practicing that, you word it in such a way that it's, even if you're giving constructive feedback, it's still kind of positive and you're still encouraging other people to do that. And then you network with people, and then people then can follow you on your other socials, and it just grows from there. Then people can offer you jobs or projects. And I think that's really important. Like, for example, I was speaking to someone from Nux.js team. Actually, she's going to be on my channel next week, I think. And what she said to me was she was contributing to this project, and she just wanted to because she was really passionate, and she was doing a lot of like DevRel, so like speaking about it, how she loved Nux.js and so on. And they got a load of funding. I think they got like 20 million or something. Who are they going to call first? They called her and said, do you want to do this and get paid for it? She's like, well, I'm
Right.
doing it anyway. Might as well get paid for it.
Right.
And so that's really important. And just to add one last thing to that, when I go to my clients and they say, right, we want to hire people, I say, well, have you got any open source projects? Yes, we've got a small one. Brilliant. Well, the first person we're going to hire are the top contributors to your project because they know your kind of your workflow. They know your standards, like your commit messages and your style, etc. Although there's standards out there, some people obviously kind of spin it slightly to suit their needs. And they're the first people that you're going to hire. So if anyone has a company that they would love to work for one day, I suggest getting involved in the conversation on their open source repos because that's where they're going to look first.
Excellent. And I like how you set all this up and phrase this because this is a way that any developer can start very low risk, get started with no financial investment, no money needed. They can, as long as they have an internet connection and a way to get to GitHub, they can get started today. And I think that is it's amazing because as you were mentioning earlier, 15 years ago, this just wasn't possible for people to get started so easily. The barrier to entry has never been more accessible. And so using GitHub as a platform for employment, building your skills, even if you don't, like you said, you don't even know, you don't need to know how to code hardly. You could just start with a comment or documentation or something. And that
That's way to start.
process, that process is just going to make you a better developer no matter where you are. So that's really important for people who are new to the industry, especially because there are a lot of spots on the internet where they aren't very friendly to new people. You know, how many times have we gone to a Stack Overflow post? Not to bag on Stack Overflow, we've all used it, but not really newbie friendly. And some people are really discouraged that way. But if they take it, if they start with the method you're describing, um, it can be a really safe, low risk way to get your foot in the door and then just snowball from there.
I just want to add one more thing to that because you reminded me of something that's really important. There are some really inclusive projects out there. I'm not going to name any now, but there are some really inclusive ones. And there are some that are not so inclusive. And the way that people can figure out which ones are inclusive and welcoming to people who are new to open source, new to tech, is look at the closed issues and the closed pull requests.
Mm.
Because if they've been closed, but with a comment saying, thank you very much for your contribution, but we would, this is not the way we want to go. Maybe you can think about doing X, Y, and Z. Then you know that they've closed it because they didn't want it. It was done incorrectly, but they want you to contribute more. Whereas if a project and a project maintainer just closes the pull request or issue with no comment, and that's not very inclusive. And there are quite a few out there. So do have a look at the closed ones and see what the comments look like. And if it looks friendly, then get started. And there are so many friendly ones out there that they want you, they'll mentor you as well. Some of them actually have teams of people to mentor you to contribute to their projects. Because the great thing about having someone new to the project, no matter what level they're at, junior to senior, and I hate the terminology junior, but no matter what level they're at, being new to the project, they can add so much value. really can. So whenever I get someone new to my personal team or to a client's team, first thing I do is, here's the project. What does it do? How would you set it up? If they say, I don't know, then we've got a problem. And
Right.
every time that happens, no matter how many times we do this, no matter how good it is, a new person will say, well, you've got step 1 and 2 here, but what's step 1B? I don't get how I get from this to this. I'm like, brilliant, let's add it. So therefore we can improve the project and lower the barrier to entry. So there is so much value of actually having new people. I know actually some companies in the UK have started taking on interns, paid interns from abroad, and saying, we want you here for like a month, and your goal is to try and understand our project. If you can't explain what it does, you can't understand what it does, then that's so much value that what do we need to add to help you understand it? And then that will make it better for onboarding new people. I see
Nice.
some projects take 3 months to onboard people. I'm like, what? It should be like literally kind of a few hours, but if it's done correctly. So there's so much value that all the people watching can add. So yes, please go out there and have a look. And you're always welcome to contribute to my projects.
Excellent. Yeah. And if you want to plug them in the chat or post them on this video afterward, feel free to, so people can get
Sure, I'll
involved
put a
that way.
comment in afterwards with we have some community projects from React to Angular to Tailwind to Python to a node with a Discord bot and so forth. So I'll put a comment in with the organization link, and people can join our organization. It helps people promote their profile, because then people can find you from our community organization and vice versa. So it's a two-way street. So
Excellent.
people need to raise an issue to get an invite to the organization. So we're starting to encourage people to raise an issue and get that green square for today, and just get involved in the conversation. So yeah.
Excellent. Developers, this is a good opportunity to get started with this stuff. Eddie is very excited about this stuff. He's motivated. He wants to help. It's everyone. As he says on his GitHub profile, his YouTube channel, open source is for everyone. And you are definitely a good face for that, just being so inclusive of everyone who wants to get started. Some people out there, like we said, there are projects out there, there are maintainers out there who are they want to stick to themselves in their circle. But with efforts like yours, you're saying, no, this is actually for anyone, regardless of who you are, where you live, what you do. It's here. All you got to do to get started is X, Y, and Z, and you're good to get started. So, and there's another thing
Exactly.
coming up. Talk to me about this Hacktoberfest, because this is pretty exciting too. Woo! Yes.
Okay, so Hacktoberfest. Let me start with like what you get from it, and I'll talk about what you have to do. So you can get free t-shirts and free swag. So basically free swag, stickers and t-shirts. And I say all you have to do is create 4 pull requests. And that might sound quite scary. The pull request can't be adding your name to the README. And actually, I have got a Hacktoberfest project for that, like I mentioned before. But in October, I will be archiving that project for a month, because that doesn't count towards your contribution. So practice those sort of workflow and those pull requests now. But people need to add valuable pull requests in October for Hacktoberfest, and it's 4, so it's not a lot. And valuable just means adding value to that project. And so it can be from documentation, it can be translation, it can be, there's so many things. Another tip that I got from Lee Howe, who was on my channel a few days ago on a live stream, who were going through what's the new fancy project? I forget. I'll think of the name in a second. I want to say Next.js, but it wasn't that. But yeah, we're going
It wasn't
through
Svelte, was it? Was it Svelte?
Oh yes, thank you. You know my channel better than me, Swelt. Yes, thank you.
I thought I saw that video. I was like, I think it's a Svelte video.
Yes, it was Swelt. And by the way, I think Swelt's amazing. It's really good. But actually, someone in my community is redoing our community website with Swelt, because it's just such a low barrier to entry. It was just beautiful, really beautiful.
Awesome.
But the one thing that he pointed out on a live stream, which my mind was like, was, if you can't find an issue you want to do, or again, I'm going to give some tips in a minute on how to contribute to open source and find projects. But he also suggested, look at the to-dos in the source code, because as developers, and I think the more experienced we get, I'm being really careful not to use the word junior and senior, because I really don't like that.
Why don't you?
I guess,
I want to ask you, what don't you like about junior and senior?
Because I'm gonna tell a bit of a story here. So I take a bit of I give a reason why. So I had one client, and a bank really kind of paid us all well. And we were a mix of a team, which is great. So we had a really diverse team, from ethnicity to technologies to experience. And so we had a team, or part of the team, so a few people who were, I want to use the word junior now, and I'll explain why, but junior
Okay.
testers. And they were doing things a lot manually. And when we joined the team, we said, right, we should go into automated using things like Cypress. And they were really happy with that. And we started doing some Cypress testing and so forth. But at the beginning of the sprint, so sprint is like people who don't understand the agile terminology. I know you talk about it on your channel a lot, so hopefully they do. But a sprint is like a 2-week kind of hackathon that you kind of run within your project. But it's production ready code, so it's not like a hackathon where you prototype everything. And at the end of the 2 weeks, you kind of have a target to meet. And at the beginning of the sprint, the beginning of the 2 weeks, as developers, we would be a bit busier. So we'd all be planning on the Monday, but then the first, say, few days of the sprint, we would be busier, and they would be really busy towards the end when we were kind of, passing things over. And the last couple of days of the 2 weeks, they might have a couple more features to test and automate tests and so forth. So we came up with this idea, which was, well, they can probably help with writing some of the scenarios in helping us do that, help us with some of the, maybe some of the HTML and CSS, just the kind of the grid layouts. We can start putting data on the page sooner. So then not styled correctly, and maybe not what we call high fidelity pages, but functional. So they could then start writing the tests sooner. And we even thought about having the tests in the pull request. So the pull request, when it gets reviewed by someone else in the team, it has everything, documentation, code, and tests all as one. So we're trying to bridge that gap more and more within our team. And management came along and said, well, why are the testers writing code? It's like, well, they've got nothing else to do. They want to learn. We want to help them. And it's just a great way for us to really work closely together. And we're finishing our sprints early so we can take on more work. Why wouldn't you want us to do this? We're getting more efficient and there are less bugs.
Right.
And they said, but their title is junior tester. So all they should be doing is manual testing. I just thought, so we're doing well. It's not like we're missing our deadlines, but we're beating our deadlines, and you want us to go slower. And it was really weird. So in a retrospective, so retrospective for people listening is at the end of the 2 weeks, you do a retrospective with the team, with only the core members in the team, an old terminology that we call the pigs within the team. We don't use that anymore, but the pigs, because we were kind of like a English breakfast where you have bacon and eggs. The chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. Anyway, I digress. But the people who are contributing the story points, the effort and features to that 2 weeks, we have a retrospective. And we realized that they wanted to get involved, and we really wanted them involved. So we made a decision that no one had titles. We were all team members. And the management were fine with that all of a sudden. So when we said a team member is going to work, two of us are going to work on this, then they were like fine about it. It was a bit weird, but it made me realize that titles actually, I think, put up blockers. And we also wanted, again, I'm going to use the word, but I'm going to air quotes, the less experienced people to review pull requests as well as a senior person, because they would look at things very, very differently. And the value that they added was massive. So we actually had it on that project and future projects that every pull request must be reviewed by 2 people, and one must be less experienced, one must be more experienced, because they'll look for different things. And it was just mind-blowing how efficient we became and how we worked so well together as a team. We paired a lot, and management always got worried that if we paired, it's like 2 people are doing one piece of work, that sounds really inefficient. But our workflow, our throughput became greater, the bugs reduced massively. And if we ever deployed something and they said, actually, we don't want that to go out anymore, we want to pull it out, we could literally pull out that pull request that went in, because we squashed it from our feature branches to our main line. We could actually pull that out. That would bring out the documentation, bring out the automated tests, bring out the code. We could just swap things around and cherry pick things. And it was mind blowing. I didn't realize how much titles like scared management, but also scared the people. Like some people would say to me, can't do that, I'm a junior. I'm like, do you know what you're doing? Do you know how to do it? Most of it. Well, can I help you with the rest of it? Yes. Well, let's do it then, because it only adds value to them and only adds value to the project. I think it's all about adding value to the project. It doesn't matter about job titles and experience. And that goes for open source and closed source. So that's why I hate the word junior, because I think it makes people feel nervous themselves and makes management so we also had it so that we could deploy to production by merging a pull request, and only certain people had that availability to have that green button to hit merge. but there was one more less experienced person who was just so good at writing the change log. So we said, well, she's going to deploy to production. Management freaked out. She can't go on the servers and run commands. Everything's automated. Even we wouldn't go on the servers. And actually, I can't even get onto the servers. I don't have the password or the keys. I don't want access. It's all done via a CI. So I think the titles just scare everybody. And that's why I really don't like the titles.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's like,
So
I
that was
like
so
that
long.
perspective. No, I love it. I have to ask you this question. So you talk about adding value and adding this value, and there is clearly a lot of value to be added to open source software. I have heard the argument from more than one person that there's no money in open source. Can we talk about this? Can you shine some light on this?
Let's talk about money. Okay,
Okay.
awesome. So recently, I'll say recently, a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago, GitHub released GitHub sponsors. So you can get sponsored by the community, a bit like Patreon. So that is possible.
It is very possible, which, by the way, people, shout out to Eddie himself. If you want to get my attention, throw money at me. Eddie sponsored me on GitHub sponsors. You really landed on my radar after that happened. The GitHub sponsors program is amazing. Back to you, Eddie. Just had to throw that in there.
I love it how the GitHub sponsors program, they take no commission as well. So you get all the money. And that's why I've stopped sponsoring people on Patreon and moving more towards GitHub, because they give everything to the community, which I really, really love. And in fact, for the first year or maybe 6 months, they were actually matching all the contributions, which I didn't realize until a bit later on. But
dollar for dollar, that's right. Yes, I just want to throw that in there for developers. If you find a great GitHub profile or project you want to support, GitHub matches dollar for dollar for their first year. So it's just, yeah, sorry, I just had to interject there.
No worries.
It's such an amazing, it's an amazing program. They're doing great stuff with that.
Absolutely. And if just to add one thing to that, if people have got $5 or $10 to sponsor someone, don't give it to one person. I would say give $1 to multiple people. And that's really, really important. So anyone who wants to sponsor me $5 or $10, please don't. Just give me the $1 and give the rest to somebody else. Just the $1 just shows your appreciation. And that's more than enough. That's all I want. So thank you. That'd be great. But right. So you can make money through sponsorship, and that takes time to kind of get going. So, or like with most things, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But also, you can make money indirectly. I think with my YouTube channel, I make money indirectly. People discover me from GitHub and YouTube. And they might discover me because they like the way I build a team or build a community or manage a project. So they might say, can you come in and set this project up for us? They might not want me to code on the project because maybe I'm too expensive, or maybe I'm not an expert in that technology. So again, it shows that people know how to do more than just code, which is why I kind of find it weird when people put in their title on Twitter or LinkedIn or GitHub, React developer. I'm like, so that's the only thing you can do? I think that kind of, that it's good to be niche, but I think that just puts people off. When I see CVs, where I don't really look at CVs, I go straight to their GitHub profile. And I don't care about LinkedIn either. So not that I don't have people on LinkedIn, I keep that for like a contacts list, but anyone can write whatever they want on LinkedIn. Whereas GitHub, it is what it is.
Right. So like, go ahead. Yes, I have a follow-up question, but go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yes. So putting people's out there on open source, writing blog posts, writing YouTube, some people make money directly from it and make a lot of money, and some people don't, but indirectly it makes so much money. So one of the benefits of being putting work on open source and being on YouTube, I know YouTube's not for everybody, so write a blog post, but just share things that you've learned. Even on GitHub, just create, if you're learning something new, just put your example project on there. You never know whose feed that appears in, or if someone's searching for something and your repo appears, then they can contact you. And then they can offer you jobs. And when you get offered projects or jobs and so forth, when you start getting lots, you can start being picky and you can start being choosy and say, look, then your rate is like supply and demand. If you're in demand, your money goes up. And I think if people see them active on GitHub, they're going to offer you more money. So I have people contact me daily. I'm talking big companies, as I mentioned before, contact me daily and offer me jobs, which is great. And it is a nice feeling that builds up my confidence. That means I want to do more. And I help people in the community when they message me and say, hey, I got a job at this place. Thank you so much. Great. I want to do more for the community. But putting yourself out there is hard. So web dev and software engineering is saturated, but people can stand out more by getting involved in open source. And that's why I don't like years of experience as well. It's a real, I don't listen to years of experience, because I've interviewed people who have 15, 20 years experience, but they literally have 1 year and they've done it 15, 20 times.
Right.
Whereas I have people who have 3, 5 years experience and they're amazing. And I think because they've done their day job where they probably have to do, maybe a bit of repetition, then I can see them doing open source projects. And I'm not talking about contributing to React. Right? That's great, but I'm not talking about that sort of scale. I can see them putting their learnings, right? They're playing with framework X, they're playing with library Y, they're doing GitHub Actions or CI or whatever they want. Even writing games in the browser, if you want, people will learn so much just by doing stuff and collaborating with people. So it's such a great way to make money indirectly. And I have to, as I mentioned before, and I want to reiterate, put my kind of, I guess, success, if you want to call it that, to open source and the community. I mean, I get invited to private project calls of companies that say, look, can you join us on this private call? We'd love to have your input because we've seen you play with this on open source and you seem to be, involved in that space. And remember, you don't have to be an expert in something. You just need to be more expert than the people that want to use it. So I
Exactly.
mentioned that I don't do React development, but I get put on React teams, maybe just set up the pipeline or set up the automated testing. Other things I do Angular for historically, but it doesn't mean I'm stuck to Angular. So I'd never put Angular developer in my title. No one will ever see that anywhere, because once you've picked up one framework, one library, you can pick up the other ones easier.
Right.
And if someone wants a particular technology, then they'll find that in your deeper down in your profile. And if they want you to work on that for the next 6 months, they probably will get an expert for that. But you can still join the team with something else. The amount of projects I've gone where they say, look, can you join us for a month or a week? And we're going to pay you a lot higher because you're there for a shorter period. But can you help us set up this project, part of this project, or whatever it is? And usually they're so happy that they say, well, can you stick around? And they're never going to reduce your rate. So you've got this higher rate because it's a shorter project, and they want you to stick around because they're impressed what you've done. You get to learn a new technology. So I've done a few React projects, and not because I was hired as a React developer, I was hired as something else. And then they said, look, you're a great part of the team. We'd love you to stick around. And you get to learn React at the same time. Like, you're going to pay me a high amount of money to learn some new technology. I'll stick around for 6 months, no problem.
So
So
it's kind of like an alternative to the traditional job seeking process where you write a resume, you write a cover letter, you robo send 1,000 resumes to 1,000 different companies, and it's a big time sink. But with this process, it's almost like the transparency of a place like GitHub and the open source. It illustrates a person's process, and the data is more qualitative, and employers and people with money and people, the movers and shakers, can see the process rather than just a number. And this is why it's so valuable, working with open source and working with something like GitHub.
absolutely. And we wanted to use, quite a few years ago, maybe like 6, 7 years ago, we wanted to use a specific technology, and we didn't know how to use it. And had a really tight deadline. So we had budget to hire someone. So we went to the project main community contributors and contacted the first like 5 people and said, look, we've got budget. We'd love you to come in for a month and really just kickstart this project. We're on a short deadline. And one person replied and said, yeah, I contribute to this. Here's some of the PRs I've created. We went, perfect. What's your rate? And we wanted them to come to the UK for a month. They didn't want to. So if you said, look, we'll pay you whatever you want. We have to get this done. I'm talking serious money here. I'm talking kind of like thousands of dollars per day we paid them.
Wow.
But time wasn't on our side and money was. And I went to meet them in reception, and for some reason, I was expecting like an older person, someone older than me. I don't know why. I just was. And again, my views have changed over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So take that with a pinch of salt. And they were literally at university. They were like 18 years old. And I
Wow.
was like, wow. But this person did what they could do. It did what they said they could do. And I knew that because I saw it on GitHub. And they came in and actually finished a week early. And they stuck around and helped out on the project for another week. They did that remotely from back home. So again, it's just such a way to make good money. Like if someone said to you, hey, can you work on this project? You say, no, I'm busy. Well, I want to pay you 2, 3 times your rate. You'll make time. You'll find
Right.
time to do it.
Exactly.
And then that just leapfrogs your kind of career and your next job and so forth. Because you can rather than taking small steps, you're taking giant leaps each time. So definitely invest in that. I can't express it enough.
So you think you are of the opinion that a GitHub profile is more important than a LinkedIn profile?
100%. I'm really sorry. I know in our community, there are a few people who really promote LinkedIn, and you need to have a presence on there, but mine is minimal. I've removed everything like years ago, removed everything off my LinkedIn. One, because I was getting over 1,000 messages a day. Most
Mm,
of them were irrelevant.
mhm.
It was just spam. So I've removed most of it. So now when I get, I don't know, 2, 3 messages a day, they are all actually relevant because the person to message me has had to dig deeper into not my LinkedIn profile, but my other social platforms, and they actually, know more about me. So that's helped a lot. But for me, when I hire people, again, for myself or for my clients, LinkedIn, people can write whatever they want. The amount of people I've interviewed, and it's really frustrating when they say, "Oh, yeah, I've got like 6 years in this framework." Oh, okay. And when you dig deeper, it turns out they used it at a hackathon on a weekend. Or the flip side, a minority usually says, "Oh, I've only done it for a few weeks." And you look at their GitHub or whatever, you dig deeper and you think, "You've been using this for 3 years." Oh, but I'm not very confident in it. And so it's like the year's experience for two things is just two reasons is so wrong because one, they might have just used it once each year, but they feel like they've been using it for 3 years or 6 years or whatever.
Right, right.
And also, some people play it down. Some people go, "Oh, I've only got 3 years in that. I really feel I got six. So I'm just going to put six." So it's going to BS. You can write whatever you want on LinkedIn, on the CV. Again, the only thing I want a CV for, the only thing I want LinkedIn for is to get your GitHub link so I can go have a look at what you're doing.
Mm,
And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to see your thinking process. So when I give people, I don't really give a lot of tests when I interview people. But if I do, I'm going to give a test that people cannot finish in 1 hour. It's going to be like a 1 day test, and I expect you to do it in an hour
mm.
because I want to see what you prioritize. It's really interesting to see what people prioritize. Like if someone's building a car and it takes a week to build a car, and you say, right, you've got a day. They start with the brakes, they start with the engine, they start the wheels. I just want to see where they start and how they think about it. I know they're not going to finish it, and that's the whole point. And
And again, it's the process. It's the problem-solving
yeah,
process rather than
exactly.
just typing something. And as you mentioned earlier in the stream, like a lot of what we do, most of what we do isn't doing like this the entire day. We're thinking, we're going through these processes, we're doing stuff with Git and GitHub and version control and communicating with people. Obviously, code is very important. It's a core component of what we do. But we transform it in just so many ways, the way we talk about it and communicate about it, and express it on various platforms. So I think that's an important thing too. And it's 4:44 in the Central Standard Time Zone here. So I'm gonna Eddie, if you have anything else to add, I want you to add it now. Otherwise, we're going to go to some audience questions.
I love the Q&A, but let me just kind of do a quick recap. One is everyone contribute to open source, no matter how you can, just do it, just get involved.
Hmm.
I'll pin a comment, not pin a comment, I'll put a comment in afterwards and with some links to some our community projects where you can just get started and the community will really help you and mentor you. To give one example, we had someone in our community who's new to tech. They wrote some automated tests with Cypress and Cucumber, and that's now in one of our projects. And when we move to from HTML and just Tailwind, and we moved to using Swelt, all the tests should still pass because the projects should still work the same. That really shows the value. It's running on CI. If there's any failures, it takes a video or screenshot. It's just awesome. So definitely get involved. Any shape or form, just get involved. Hacktoberfest is coming up in October. Sign up now. The registration is open, but your PRs don't count until the 1st of October. And just any questions, let me know. Get involved. It will accelerate. It's the best way to learn. It's like watching someone at the gym. You can't watch someone at the gym and say, look, I'm not getting a six pack. You need to do the workout. So with open source, don't watch people, get started and you will just learn so much. And think of little every day. Don't try and do like 20 hours in a weekend and nothing for a month. It's like brushing your teeth. If you miss a day, your teeth aren't going to fall out, but just little and often, it will really help grow your profile. That's it. I won't say any more on it.
Okay,
Let's go to
awesome.
Q&A.
Awesome. Let's go to the Q&A. Let's see here. We have a lot of people. I just want to give a shout out to everyone joining us today. Rebecca, Candace, Nick, Daniel, Paradoodly Doo, our great moderator, Destiny King 84, Montserrat, Daniel, Troy, Mitchell, a lot of people joining us today. So if you have a
Wow,
question about
awesome.
open source or jobs or anything related to GitHub or any type of coding question, let's hear it.
It's awesome to see other YouTubers here as well. I see Brian. I must have missed some more in the chat as well, but it's great to see other YouTubers come and support. So thank you all for being here. Awesome.
Okay, yeah, who's the one with the YouTube channel? Brian?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to
Uh,
check out his channel. Awesome.
yeah, I do.
All right, we got a question from Abram O. Tori. What made Eddie start getting involved with open source?
I found a bug in the documentation. When I say a bug, like a missing step, and this still happens to this day on all these projects, in that it said quick start, follow step 1, follow step 2, and follow step 3, and 4 and 5. And I got to step 3 and I was like, how do I get to step 4? I feel there's something missing. And because it was a new technology or a new library, I didn't know what that step was. But to everyone else who was on the project, it was an obvious step, so they don't have to put it in there. So if I take for example, so many projects say clone the project and run npm start, and it breaks. And so many people then raise issues, say there's a bug, and the maintainers or the contributors have forgotten to put npm install. And to everyone else, that's really obvious, but to new people, to the technology, to the project, it might not be. And that's a really great way to contribute. And that's how I started contributing, was just add missing steps or add extra notes. Like for Windows, it might be this, and for Mac, it might be this, that little notes and so forth. And from then it snowballs because you get to meet other people, and then people might tag you and say, hey, this is an issue. It's in the area you changed last time. Do you want to do it? Do make these changes? And you just meet more. You'll never find the perfect project to contribute to. So just contribute to any project, and then people and projects will kind of find you eventually. So yeah, you'll find the perfect project and the perfect people, but it takes time to get there.
Excellent.
Hopefully I
So
answered that.
one of my questions, what do you find challenging after being in this industry for so long? What are some things that just make you shudder in terror, or just, I guess, general challenges being with 15 years experience under your belt?
Still the same ones, actually. It's quite interesting how so many projects are still like lacking documentation, still lacking automated tests. Um, a lot of our community projects are lacking those as well. And so apologies for that, but I think it's a great way for people to get involved. But my client projects are run very differently. We do more test driven, so it doesn't miss those. But in the open source world, depending on the level of the project, some people want to get something working first, like a prototype, and once it's working, then they'll kind of backfill it and so on. But a lot of times they get excited and they moved on, and I'm guilty of that too. So it's a great way for people to get involved. I think out of date documentation is worse than no documentation, because if there's no documentation, you go look in the code, you go look in the package.json, see what commands are available, etc. But if
Right.
there's documentation, you kind of follow it, and then it doesn't work, and it's really odd. So that's I guess my biggest pain point is out of date documentation. I think is worse than no documentation. So it's
Interesting. Okay.
like if you're driving a car and you knew there were no brakes, you'd go slower. But if you think the brakes work, you'd drive normally and go faster. And when you need the brakes, it's kind of not there. So that's kind of, I guess, my analogy for it. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Interesting. Thank you. Okay, we have a super chat here from Cole McTarmich. Thank you, Cole, for the super chat. Wants to know, Eddie, what are your top resources to learn employable skills?
I'm going to say something, and you're probably going to laugh. I'm going to say GitHub, because when people say, "Oh, I followed all these tutorials and I've read this blog post and I've watched these videos," that's great. I watch videos to learn as well, and I think that's really important to do it. But GitHub puts it in practice. I know I've given the gym analogy already, so it's just so important to understand the workflow. I've actually seen people do really well in an interview and a test. And when I say, can you, this is our project, can you contribute to it? They go, oh, but I haven't got access to push to the main default branch. I'm like, well, create a branch, create a pull request. What's that? I'm thinking, how can you've been in the industry for say 6 years or whatever, you're really an expert in framework X, Y, and Z, yet you can't do simple workflow. So it's really important, I think, to understand not necessarily the best practices, but the practices that we use, and which is where in open source, I think there's a lot of automation around that. So a lot of projects do have automation. So when you do something, it will kind of notify you that something's gone wrong rather than doing it in a job and it takes someone to review it and then you kind of rub them up the wrong way because it seemed obvious to them that you should know that already. So the best resources, GitHub and get started. That's probably like a cop out question, I think, an answer that people think, but I really believe that. I really do.
Well, especially because of this issue of tutorial hell, where there are just, I mean, literally millions of resources, whether you want books or blogs or videos or interactive code editors. I mean, there's a million resources for every person on earth wanting to learn to code. But I think the point that you make is just getting yourself out there and getting some oxygen involved in your process is just it'll change your life. Like, I noticed that too when I first started, because I felt very comfortable taking these courses and getting into tutorial hell. It's just you and someone talking, or just you and an editor, code editor. But when you're actually collaborating with others, and going back to our previous conversation when we first started this stream about trying a little bit harder because you know someone out there is watching, not being perfect, but just incrementally better. And it challenges you in a way. I guess what I'm trying to say is when you're doing tutorials, it's easy to not challenge yourself. But using something like GitHub, you are called to a little bit of a higher standard there, and that will pressure you to perform better, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome, great answer. So, do you have any? I'm curious about, like, we kind of talked this about this a little bit, but maybe do you have a list of your favorite repos where newbies can start, or just, I know because I know you offer a lot of great resources too. But is there like a list of projects where separated by level or something where people can get started?
Not yet, but after you mentioning that, I think we should probably get the community to create one, and then people can, put their projects that they like contributing to. Because on a live stream I was doing, I was getting people to get into open source, get their green squares, and one person really wanted to contribute to a Python project, a framework, and so I helped them find something they could do. I helped them through the motion to get that green square, and the project maintainer just closed the pull request, and we follow their standards and their commit messages, everything else. So it wasn't clear why it was closed.
Mm,
And so that's not a project that people really should contribute to, because it kind of demotivates you. Then you think, I've put this effort in, it might only be kind of a couple of lines changes, but it still takes 30 minutes or whatever it is. So that probably wouldn't go on the list. But you're right, there might be some projects that actually, I know some projects that are really welcoming, like actually people who want to get into Python, for example. I know a project called Kiwi TCMS. I've seen them at loads of events, and they actually mentor people. You don't have to know Python, you don't have to know anything like that. They would mentor you, and they are an amazing team, completely open source. They have a bit of funding, so they can spend some extra time mentoring people, and the team is great. I'll share a link in my comment, um, in
excellent.
the video. But it is, yes, we should maybe make a list of what projects people contribute to and which ones they've liked contributing to. So that's a
Okay.
really good idea. But do look for issues, good first issues, Hacktoberfest issues, sorry, issue label, I should say, and check the closed issues and closed pull requests. Make sure they're friendly.
That's right. Excellent. Okay. Osama Garib wants to know, do you need a quote clean code in your GitHub to get a job?
So like by clean code, you mean like kind of perfect, proper, abstraction, all this awesome stuff? Yes and no, because you might have a prototype project. You're just playing with some new tech. So
Mm,
that's not going to be perfect. You just want to kind of get something working, and then you might forget about it and go on to the next tool. I think it's important to learn lots of things a little, and then have a couple of things that you go really deep into. They call it the T-shaped developer now. There's all these buzzwords coming up and so forth. But I
interesting.
think it's I think it's really important to go wide on everything and then go deep in a couple of things. And so, for example, I interviewed someone and I asked them a really hard question. I knew it was going to be a hard question. And they said, I don't know the answer. I know exactly where I'll look for it. I said, well, okay, well, here's a laptop, search for it. And they knew exactly what to search for and where it was. And that's a perfect answer, because we cannot remember everything. It is impossible to remember everything. And that's just silly if we try. But the important thing is not to just try and Google blindly, like, how do I do a thing that's really kind of doesn't make sense. Whereas people can Google what the right terminology, then it's really important. So, for example, design patterns. I like to ask design pattern questions, and this is more architectural and coding rather than visual. And people can't know all the design patterns. There's so many of them, but it's good for them to understand when you would use different ones. And yes, there is a lot of overlap between them. So you might say, well, there's a couple here, two or three I'd need to look into more detail. And that's also fine. I know I look those up when I need them, but I know kind of the two or three that I kind of want to look for and read more into, remind myself which one would suit best. Whereas rather than what is a design pattern and how do I use it? Because it's just, you wouldn't get the answer that you would. It's like saying to someone, I don't know, and this is actually important. So I'm sorry to kind of take a, a slight detour. Asking for help is just like searching on Google or asking a colleague or a friend for help. If you say, how do I build a car or how do I build a web app? The person's going to be like, oh, I haven't got time to answer this. We'll be here for ages. But if you said, I'm building a web app, this is the error, this is the problem I've got, this is what I've tried, but it doesn't work, they're going to be able to give you a one-line answer that's going to help you and it's going to help them because they don't have to kind of get blood out of a stone and say, well, what have you tried? Have you tried this? Yeah, I've tried that already. Well, why didn't you say you tried that? Okay, what about this? And so you want to help people along. Help people help you is what I'm trying to say.
And yeah, and again, the importance of that communication, like you were saying, what did you try? Uh, what is the actual problem? Rather than, well, I'm stuck and I don't know what to do. And having that attitude, being proactive and articulating the problem in such a way where the person who wants to help can do so in an efficient manner. I was there's this website or a web page. I don't remember the name of it, but it's called something just painfully obvious, like how to ask questions or something. And
Okay.
it has just bullet point by bullet point, great advice. I might have to pull that up again because I haven't seen it for years. But there are, certain ways and certain techniques a person can use to ask better questions. And so they're going to get better answers and everyone's happy and can get on with their day. So
And just to add one more story to that, I think also it kind of makes us, like you said, the better communication. But I was on one team once, and when I first joined, they said, look, these are your team that you need to kind of, mentor and so forth. But this one person, don't spend too much time with them because we're probably going to get rid of them next month. They're not very good. And so I spent the month working with them. And at the end of the month, they said, look, we're going to ask this person to leave, or can you ask this person to leave? And I was like, no, they're definitely part of the team. But they're not doing the coding that we hired them to. I said, they're not. They're doing something else that none of the rest of us are doing.
mm,
And they were actually, when bugs came up, they loved debugging. They never fixed the bug. They were a bit nervous about making changes, but they loved debugging it and putting like a really good description on what they've found, what they think it is, and all the rest. So when we came to sprint planning, we could say we could estimate our bugs really like perfect, almost perfectly, because it had already been debugged. And that added so much value to the team. So the entire team fought for this person to stay, actually fought for them to have a pay rise because they added so much value to the team. So
wow.
it's really important just to add value to the team. Don't worry about I must do this. It's more about adding value to the team that then your teammates or the community can really kind of fight for you and help you and whatever you need.
Do you think companies are becoming more flexible with the various roles developers play, or is it still very much like an old school thing where the workers have to rally for an employee? Like, are attitudes changing, do you think?
I think they definitely are. And, COVID has been horrible, but it is one positive is it's really pushed a lot of the kind of archaic and out of date companies to think about remote, to think about mental health, to think about adding value to the project. It's the job offers I've been having since COVID have been so different. They've been worded differently. And they've even said, look, we need kind of this from you. It's not necessarily, you don't have to do it full time. If you want to work full time, you can. If you don't have to. Just we'll do whatever works with you, but we'd love you to be part of the project, the community, the team, etc. So I think companies are realizing that it's about adding value rather than bums on seats. Because I've always avoided bums on seats companies where they say, look, you've got to come in for 8 hours a day. And it's like, well, what do I need to do and achieve? And like, don't care. As long as you're physically there. And basically people are watching YouTube or Netflix while bums on seats, but because their bum is there, the company's happy, which is, yeah, companies are being aware it's about adding value to the project rather than just bums on seats. So
And
yes, they
so,
are slowly getting there.
so when you say add value, I mean, this is pretty much what we've been talking about the entire stream, but can you articulate just like kind of in a bullet point way, some examples of adding value?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think find where the gaps are within the team. So like when you have like a squad in the army, yes, they're all trained to shoot a gun or do whatever they need to do. But one will specialize in being the medic for the team. One will specialize in the team's morale. One will specialize in X, Y, and Z. So it's when I build teams, and I think a lot of companies are doing this. Everyone's probably like he's got their role, front end, back end, full stack, etc. But then someone kind of is like the advocate for the automated testing. Someone's the advocate for documentation. Doesn't mean they have to do it, but they're the advocate for it. And so I think find a gap, and then you can. It's so much easier to add value when there's a gap. So if no one's doing like writing the scenarios that you need to build for the sprint, write that, and people will love you for it. And then they're because they're adding so much value, right? There's no one's doing that. Or if there's no documentation, don't try and write a whole book, but just try and I don't know, write some bullet points or something like that. And again, people will love you for that because that's a huge gap that no one wanted to do either because they didn't have time, they didn't know how, or they just didn't want to. So I think find a gap within a team, find what isn't being done and do it. It doesn't have to be big, but in other people's eyes, it will be big in other people's eyes, but it doesn't have to be like you have to stay up all night or anything like that. I'm not saying work all hours, but you might spend 50 minutes a day doing something, but to everyone else, that's just like a huge benefit to the project and the team. So yeah, just find that what everyone's neglecting and make it something that you enjoy doing. And if you get good at it and people like it and respond to it, you'll enjoy it more, I think, as well.
Right, and the typical company has a lot of gaps, so there's a lot of places to get started, and as a new hire, all eyes are on you, so I think, that first couple weeks, that first month, just finding those smaller gaps where you can stand out in a positive way is just gonna it's just gonna stand make you stand out in such a great way. So, yeah, that's great advice. All right, developers, we have time for one more question because it is getting late here. But thanks everyone for joining us. This is Eddie. He has a YouTube channel. He is very active on GitHub. We have been talking about open source software code, getting started in GitHub with GitHub, Hacktoberfest coming up, all sorts of stuff. So thank you so much for tuning in. After this stream, Eddie is going to pop into the video in the comment section and add some links and things that you guys are going to find helpful, I think. So be sure to check back for that, especially if you're interested in getting started with open source. On that note, Eddie, any parting words of wisdom for the viewers out there?
Get started today. It's 11 o'clock here in the UK as well, but get started today. Just 5 minutes, just raise an issue or just go maybe find a project that you might contribute to tomorrow over the weekend. Don't necessarily have to do it today, but just kind of dip your toe in the water. It will not only accelerate your learning, your communication, your networking, but also help you get the job and then the money that you deserve and a lifestyle that you deserve. So I think it's really important for people just to get started. And yeah, any questions, jump in, tag me in RealToughCandy's Discord or join our Discord as well. You're more than welcome to. And yes, don't forget Hacktoberfest. Get practicing. Don't wait for the 1st of October. Get practicing now. Make all your mistakes now. The 1st of October, you can even add more value to the open source community so you can stand out more.
4 pull requests. That's it. That's to get rolling with Hacktoberfest. There's lots of cool swag and a great community there. So
Absolutely. I want to add one last thing if I've got time.
for sure.
I've just thought
Absolutely.
of it. I was just
Absolutely.
going to say that one of my big clients that I got recently was not because of my code on GitHub. It was because of my documentation on GitHub. So they said, we love what you do on GitHub. And this is like the best. And I was like, and all I did was write tips to my kind of myself, I suppose, and the community and just like bullet points. And then over time, I improved it. And over time, people then contributed and improved it a bit more. And it kind of exploded a little bit, not huge, but I don't know, maybe like 6-10 pages of tips, like bullet point tips about open source. And that was what put me on their radar. And that allows me to kind of, command the projects that I want, the money that I want. So it's not just about code on GitHub. So people put whatever you want on there just to kind of get started. And you never know what kind of people notice and what resonates with them.
Excellent. All right. Great chat today, Eddie. Thank you so much for coming on the channel. I hope you're open to coming back on again, because some people in the
would love
chat
to.
here, awesome. I'd love to have you on. A lot of people in the chat here are very hyped about this. Lots more questions to ask you too. So I would love to pick your brain for a part 2.
I would love to. I mean, being on your channel has been, it's been such a privilege, and it's awesome. So thank you so much for having me on your channel. Everyone watching, give Real Tough Candy's video a thumbs up.
Yes.
Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell button so you can get notified every time she goes live and posts a video.
I need you for a permanent hype man. Just come on like every day and just 15-second live stream. That's all we need. Move on to the next thing. All right. So this is the most awkward thing about Zoom, is that there's a 20-second time lag. So I'm going to wave to the camera. And when I see my hand start waving on YouTube, I'm going to hit the end stream button. Everybody, thank you so much. At any minute. Okay. We're just going to keep waving until the lag ends here.
What do you think? Open source. Do open source.
The Octocat even getting in on it. All right, let me see this wave here. Man, there must be a 30-second lag on this thing. Okay, here we go. I'm seeing a hand wave. All right, end stream.